Good morning, everyone. My name is George Gozi. Mwasuze mutieyo abatula ku Premier Sport kansubire mwasuze bulungi obudde obadde baba buyita batya mu Luganda kiddedde bwe kityo naye nga abasinga badde bakye base by the way tuzukidde ffe saawa 11 obudde buganya okutya gamba obudde bwepo obudde bukyali naye obudde buli awe butyo naye ekirungi nti tusobodde okukeesa ate tukomyewo. And of course we're still getting into the latest of sport. We've got plenty to talk about. We've got Barcelona. Barcelona yesterday got a shock of their lives. I've met so many people along when I was coming today to work. People called me yesterday, in the morning and told me, Joe, we told you AC Milan would actually win against Barcelona. But I told them I wouldn't bet. I would never have betted my money on AC Milan beating Barcelona. That's why I call it a surprise win. It's not that kind of result that you'll talk about and say, I knew AC Milan will beat Barcelona. There's what we call the Titanic in football. There are clubs that can lose a football match, but there are clubs that it takes so hard for them to lose a football match, and that's Barcelona. The statistics tell it all. When you look at their performance, Barcelona, in the last seasons, you realize that they don't lose. Even against AC Milan, the odds were always against AC Milan. But I must give credit for purposes of analysis. I give credit to AC Milan, the way they handled the game. But we'll be discussing all that in the show. And of course, we'll discuss some other issues concerning the cranes and of course the CAF and the draws that have been made. That will be made, of course, for the next Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco. But let's look at what Bukede has to offer. Cranes, Bobby Aziza Mutumba, kumpira gwa Liberia. Cranes egenda kuba etunkane Liberia kumpira ogwa World Cup qualifier. Egenda okubeera yo mu Brazil. Ezigenda okubeera empakezo mu Brazil mu 2024. Naye nga Cranes egenda kuba ekwatagana ne Liberia. Omupiira ogwo muzibu nnyo naye gugenda kubeerayo nga 24 omwezi ogujja ogwa March. Tebo abazanyi ba URA basobodde okufuna akavu oluvannyuma lw'okukola draw ne team ya Cotton Sport ya Cameroon. Bafunye emitwalo 80 buli muzanyi. Abazanyi 16 bonna bafunye emitwalo 80. When we go to the New Vision, we've got over 400 million at stake for Kiprotich. Kiprotich set for an emotional return to London. Now, this is very exciting. Of course, there's so much money in, of course, sports. The London Marathon is on the 21st of April. Will Kiprotich do it again? We can only wait for time. Now, last but not least, in the Daily Monitor, we've got term limits to make Uganda Olympic Committee trendsetters in Africa. Now, this is the greatest thing probably that I think Blake has done. I think and his team, because one of the biggest problems that have been affecting sports and the federation is that there are no term limits. You will be a president of a federation for as long as you're elected. Now, that kind of situation, of course, has ushered in people who don't want to leave positions. People use a lot of bribery and, of course, sometimes get into positions and they never leave. They become what you'd call leaders for life, and you can never lead for life. And when you look at some of the federations, specifically football, the football federation all over the world does not have term limits. For as long as the delegates elect you, you remain the FIFA president or the Zambian president or the Cameroonian president or the FIFA president. Now, that has got advantages, but it has also got adverse effects on what you'd call the activities of the game and, of course, the vision. Now, the guys at Uganda Olympic Committee are saying for the first time, they are saying they are going to have term limits. And that is a very, very exciting development for as far as sport is concerned. When I take you back in football, when I started watching football and following football vividly, one of the presidents I saw was João Avalanche, the Brazilian. He was, I think, president for FIFA for as many as 20-something years. Now, of course, it took him a lot of time. I think it was age that finally decided to say, you know what, I'm done. But there were so many things that happened in football then, very bad things that happened during João Avalanche's time. You've heard about the scandals, the briberies, and so many things, because the man could not leave that chair because there is no term limits. Of course, we've seen Sepp Blatter. Sepp Blatter will be FIFA president for as long as he wants, for as long as the delegates vote him. Now, of course, for Uganda Olympic Committee, I think it's going to go a long way to try and improve on the services as far as the Olympic activities in Uganda are concerned. And of course, getting into the other sports, you've been hearing about this man called Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong is one of the finest cyclists that the world has ever seen, having won 7 Tour de France titles. He has put on the yellow jersey 7 times, but we all know that he's been under a lot of investigations about using unprescribed, or what you'd call banned substances in some of the races that he participated in the last couple of seasons. And of course, the latest is that the association in charge, of course, of doping in the US wants to really have an interview with him, and he has said that I will not have that interview, because if he accepts, of course his ban will be reduced, but he would have actually admitted to the fact that he took the drugs. Remember, a couple of months ago he did appear on the Oprah Winfrey show, Lance Armstrong, and he admitted that he had actually used the bad substances. But what is important is that he still refuses to accept with the association that he actually used these unprescribed drugs. Of course, the American 41-year-old, of course, did admit at Oprah Winfrey show, but of course, in terms of implications, it would be a bigger implication if he did actually admit that he did manage to use those drugs. Of course, he's a man who has gone through a lot, have been diagnosed with testicular cancer in 1996. Of course, he fought the disease, he fought the cancer, won a lot of Tour de France titles, and finally, of course, he got into that mess that could just destroy his entire career, if it has not been destroyed already, because he has lost a lot of endorsements, a lot of sponsorships, and his personal image has also been dented greatly, as far as I know. Now, that's very bad news. That's very bad news. And news coming in from African football is that CAF has already now decided that the draws for the next Africa Cup of Nations will take place in March of next year. Of course, as we look forward to see exactly which teams are going to be playing the other teams. Remember, CAF will now be reverting back to the old format, where you'll have teams in pots. Uganda has been put in pot 2, which has the likes of Egypt. So we can't play Egypt in the qualifiers. And we'll wait to see what that General Assembly of CAF will have to offer as far as the draws of the Africa Cup of Nations, which will be held in Morocco in 2015. That's the latest coming in from CAF. Now, the latest coming in from football, yesterday we were treated to some fantastic footballing action in the Champions League, as we saw Galatasaray taking on Schalke of Germany. Galatasaray, of course, boasting with some fantastic footballers like Didier Drogba, of course, having returned having come back from Shanghai Shu. And of course, he did get a loan move to Galatasaray. They have some interesting players like Felipe Melo and of course Wesley Sneijder. They are a star-studded side, and of course you expect them to really get on the score sheet. And indeed they did. The Turkish side, a couple of sloppy defending from Schalke cost them dearly, and it was that early goal. They could have scored so many goals on the night, but somehow they were denied by posts by the goalkeeper of Schalke, who had a very fantastic run out. And of course, it was that moment where Schalke thought it was over, but a wonderfully struck goal that ensured the American international Jermaine Jenas, of course, scoring a goal that could just play Schalke into the next stage of the Champions League. But you must thank the goalkeeper, the former Valencia and of course Stuttgart goalkeeper Timo Hildebrand, had a very fantastic night out for Schalke. It was never easy to play against Galatasaray because they're a very good side, and you probably thought that Schalke did themselves a lot of service getting that vital draw against a very tricky side of Galatasaray. Now, the other big game of the night saw AC Milan take on Barcelona. It was against all odds that AC Milan would win this game at the San Siro. I know that AC Milan is a successful club in Europe, but they lost out on 13 players last season, including Gennaro Gattuso, Andrea Pirlo, and of course so many others, including Pato. And somehow, in terms of quality, AC Milan did not have the quality that they used to have in the past. Of course, players like Stefan Al-Sharawi, who I think had a fantastic game, Kevin Prince Boateng, Suli Montari was very good in that midfield, veteran player, and of course Ambrosini. But look at this goal. This was a very controversial goal. Look at that handball. Clearly that was handball from the AC Milan player, and of course it cost Barcelona dearly. But of course the strike from Kevin Prince Boateng cannot be understated. And that game, surely, you must give credit. Look at this goal. Suli Muntari, Zapata sets him up, Sharawi, and of course a wonderfully struck goal from, of course, Suli Muntari, the former Portsmouth player, and of course Ghanaian international, scored a wonderful goal. Look at the Barcelona defense. At some point, Barcelona looked like they really ran out of ideas, especially in defense. But when you look at the game proper, you must give credit to Maximiliano Allegri, the coach of AC Milan. He knew, when you look at the game analysis of the first half and the second half, AC Milan knew that they would not compete with Barcelona in terms of play. In terms of possession, Barcelona was on top in the first half. But the biggest problem is that Barcelona could not be allowed. The same thing that happened between Arsenal and Bayern Munich. They could not be allowed to reach the dangerous area. That's the last quarter. And that's why you must credit the defense of AC Milan. A young defense, but I think they held themselves well. And of course, the leadership of Philippe Mexis, the French international. You realize that Barcelona and Lionel Messi, when you look at the key players of Barcelona, all of them were denied to play. When you look at a player like Lionel Messi, he had one of his worst days, I think, in the last 2 years. It's never easy to play against Barcelona. They know it. If you looked at the game proper, AC Milan knew their weakness. They knew they could not compete with the passing game of Barcelona, even when they were at home. So what do? You play a counter-attacking game. Play the numbers, close up the space, try and do that, and play not just at 100%, play at 120%. I'd like to end the show on that note. I'd like to say I'll catch you tomorrow. It's been myself, Joe Chigozi, taking you through Premier Sport.